It's just past midnight in Moscow, Idaho, a peaceful college town where students laugh, party, and dream about the future. No one knew that within a few hours, this same town would wake up to one of the darkest nights in American history. November 13th, 2022. Inside a three-story off-campus home on King Road, 5 students were sleeping, but by sunrise, only one of them would walk out alive. 4 young souls, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Zana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their own beds. No robbery, no sign of forced entry, just pure horror. The question that soon followed, who could have done something like this, would lead to a man whose job was to study murderers. Bryan Kohberger, a 28-year-old PhD student at Washington State University, soft-spoken, intelligent, focused, and obsessed with understanding criminal minds. He wasn't just studying criminology, he lived and breathed it. He wrote research papers about how killers choose their victims. He even tried to survey criminals online, asking, "How did you feel before you committed your crime? What drove you to do it?" At first glance, he was just a student fascinated by psychology. But as detectives later realized, his fascination might have turned into something far darker. 3:28 a.m., November 13th. A white Hyundai Elantra is seen on surveillance cameras driving repeatedly through the King Road neighborhood. It passes the same street 4 times. At 4:04 a.m., the car returns again, its headlights off. Moments later, faint sounds of movement and a muffled scream are heard inside the house. By 4:20 a.m., the same car speeds away into the darkness. Inside, 4 students lay dead. 2 others, miraculously, survived. When police arrived that morning, what they saw was chaos. Blood on the walls, beds overturned, phones scattered, and near one of the bodies, a small brown leather sheath. On it, a single trace of male DNA. That single clue would change everything. Detectives had no suspect, no motive, and no weapon. But they had one lead: that car. They searched DMV databases, surveillance footage, and traffic cameras across Idaho and Washington. Days turned into weeks. Then a breakthrough. Washington State University campus police found security footage of a white Hyundai Elantra registered to Bryan Kohberger. Detectives started digging into his background. No criminal record, no violence. Just a quiet criminology student who lived 10 miles from the murder scene. But then came the DNA match. Investigators secretly collected trash from Kohberger's parents' home in Pennsylvania. When tested, the DNA from that trash matched the sample found on the knife sheath. The odds? More than 99.9%. It was enough. On December 30th, 2022, SWAT teams broke into his family's home and arrested him in the middle of the night. The criminology student had just become the headline of the very crimes he once analyzed. When the news broke, people couldn't believe it. A criminology PhD student accused of a quadruple murder? Friends and professors were stunned. Some said Bryan was awkward, but harmless. Others remembered the way he stared at people, almost as if he was studying them. But the public wanted answers. Why those 4 students? What was the connection? What was his motive? Investigators dug through his phone records, laptop data, and social media. No direct link was ever found between Kohberger and the victims. No texts, no messages, no photos, nothing. As detectives followed the digital breadcrumbs, more unsettling patterns appeared. Kohberger's cell phone had pinged near the King Road house at least 12 times before the murders. Always late at night, always in the same area. Was he stalking the house or studying it as part of his obsession with crime scenes? No one knows. Even today, police say, we still can't confirm his reason for being there. Then there was his search history, terms related to tracking cell towers, DNA analysis, and how to leave no trace. He'd even turned off his phone for a 2-hour window during the murders, the only time it went dark for weeks. Every move looked calculated, every step rehearsed. It was as if the killer wanted to prove he could outsmart everyone. In July 2025, after nearly 2 years of hearings, Bryan Kohberger stunned the court by pleading guilty to all charges, 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 of burglary. The judge sentenced him to 4 life sentences without parole. But even in that moment, he never explained why. No apology, no tears, just silence. His lawyers revealed later that Bryan had been diagnosed with autism, OCD, ADHD, and a restrictive eating disorder called ARFID. But psychologists say none of that justifies cold-blooded murder. And that brings us to the haunting truth. We still don't know the why. Even with the case closed, some questions remain frozen in time. Why those victims? Out of hundreds of students in Moscow, why that one house? Was it personal or purely random? What was the motive? Power? Control? A twisted experiment? Or was it something darker? Sexual, psychological, or even academic? Who was the intended target? Some believe Kaylee or Madison were the main targets. Others think Bryan simply wanted to kill anyone. Where is the murder weapon? The knife sheath was found. The knife itself? Never recovered. Why didn't he fight the case? He spent months saying he was innocent, then suddenly pled guilty. Did he do it to protect someone? Or was he tired of pretending? Why the silence? At sentencing, when given a chance to speak, he refused, not a single word. Some investigators think Kohberger viewed the killings as a control fantasy, a way to feel dominant after years of isolation. Others think he wanted to create the perfect crime, a test of his own intelligence. He studied criminal profiling, DNA mistakes, and investigative psychology, and still left behind the one thing he couldn't control, a single trace of himself. It's chilling to think that maybe, deep down, he wanted to be caught, to be known, to be remembered, even for the worst thing imaginable. But beyond the theories and the courtroom drama were 4 young lives. Kaylee, Madison, Zana, and Ethan. Friends, siblings, dreamers. Their families still struggle with the question, why? No motive can ever bring them peace, and Bryan's silence only deepens their pain. For them, this isn't just a story of crime and punishment. It's a story of stolen futures and unanswered questions that will echo for years. Bryan Kohberger now spends every day in a small prison cell, under heavy watch. No more criminology classes. No more research. Just silence. Maybe that's what he wanted. To keep the world guessing forever. To die with the secret that everyone's still trying to solve. And maybe that's the scariest part of all. What do you think happened that night? Was it a calculated experiment by a genius gone mad? Or something even darker? Let me know your theory in the comments. Sometimes the ones who study darkness become it. Before we begin, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. At you on the street. Polite, quiet, almost harmless. Now imagine that same man secretly committing acts so disturbing that they would shock the entire nation. This isn't fiction. This was real. His name was Albert Fish, one of America's most chilling real-life monsters. Before we begin, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss what happens next. Albert Fish was born Hamilton Fish in 1870 in Washington, D.C. His father was 75 when he was born and passed away when Albert was only 5 years old. Soon after, his mother placed him in St. John's Orphanage, a place that would scar
My darling, I'm writing to you, but I do not know where you are.
him forever. He later said, I saw things there that changed my mind completely. The pain and punishment he witnessed as a child would shape his dark desires later in life. As a teenager, he began to explore strange and harmful fantasies. At 28, he married a woman named Anna, and together they had 6 children. To neighbors, he looked like a quiet, working-class father, but behind closed doors, he was losing control. If this already feels unsettling, hit subscribe, because the next part is where the nightmare truly begins. Fish began traveling across the country, often working odd jobs and moving from city to city. During this time, several children went missing under mysterious circumstances. Authorities rarely connected the cases. The victims came from poor families, and the crimes went largely unnoticed. Fish blended in easily. No one suspected the soft-spoken old man who lived among them. Then came the case that finally revealed his true face. Grace Budd, an 11-year-old girl from New York. In 1928, Fish posed as a wealthy farmer named Frank Howard and visited Grace's parents, pretending he wanted to hire their son for work. Instead, he convinced the family to let Grace accompany him to a so-called birthday party. Grace never returned home. For years, the case remained unsolved, until one day, a letter arrived at the Budd family's home. It described in chilling detail what had really happened. Investigators traced the stationery to a boarding house, followed the lead, and finally arrested Albert Fish. Behind that quiet smile, police found a man who had committed unthinkable crimes for decades. If this story shocks you, don't forget to subscribe, because it only gets darker. During questioning, Fish calmly described his actions, showing no sign of guilt. Detectives said he spoke as if he were telling a bedtime story, emotionless, almost detached from reality. He confessed to multiple killings and to writing letters to families describing what he had done. It was one of the most disturbing confessions investigators had ever heard. At his trial in 1935, Fish pleaded insanity. Psychologists described him as a man consumed by pain, guilt, and delusion, someone who believed he was fulfilling a twisted form of punishment. The jury, however, decided that he was fully aware of his actions. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish met his end in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. Witnesses said he remained calm until the very last moment, a haunting end to one of the darkest stories in American crime history. Even today, his case is studied by criminologists trying to understand how evil can hide behind an ordinary smile. He looked like a neighbor, a kind old man, but inside he carried something the world had never seen before. And that's the scariest part, because evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it smiles right back at you. If this story gave you chills, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments. Could someone like Albert Fish still walk among us today?